let's start the discussion with Natasha Walter, Dame Anne Leslie, Paris Lees and Anna Span. Ladies, welcome to all of you. The very big question of today, feminism in 2013, what is it? Are we all feminists now? Are we post-feminism? Lots of people say to me they don't even know what that means. Natasha, I am going to start with you because you have written books and articles about this over a long period of time. Are you a feminist? Are you happy to call yourself such? What does it mean in 2013?
I'm very, very proud to call myself feminist, and it worries me in a way when I hear women being reluctant to call themselves feminists, because I think if we call ourselves feminists, we know that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, really, because we can look back and see everything that feminism has already achieved for women. And it is an it is a story of incredible success in some ways. We wouldn't be able to be sitting here today having this kind of debate about these kinds of issues if it wasn't for what feminism has already achieved. And of course, also, if we call ourselves feminists, it reminds us of everything that feminism still has to do. And I think feminism is a straightforward movement that's all about equality and it's all about freedom. So it's about economic, political, educational equality, but it's also about freedom, it's about liberation, it's about saying to women, yes, we can be free, we can move towards a society in which we can be free from the threat of violence, in which we can be free to fulfil our dreams.
And men can and should be feminists too.
I absolutely agree. I think men should be feminists too. I think it's great, actually, that more men, I think, now than ever before that I've heard, that I've read, are now coming forward and saying, yes, actually I am a feminist, and trying to work out what does that mean in their private and public lives. So I think that's great to see.
I mean, Anne, you have been groundbreaking in your career. That makes you a feminist, doesn't it?
Well, funnily enough, what made me a feminist was discovering, because I was very spoilt by my family. I lived on the subcontinent, which is where I was born, covered with servants and all that, and spoilt to death. So I never had to fight for anything until I started in journalism when I came down from Oxford, and this was in '62. And I was getting a huge amount of money because I was the top paid feature writer on the newspaper. So, of course, I thought I'm going to buy a house. Ha! I'm a woman. I wasn't married. Shock, horror. I went round every mortgage company and, they would say, dear, why don't you find yourself a nice, handsome man and he'll look after all this for you?
And what did you say?
Well, I was just shaking with rage. And funnily enough, I was happened in the office sitting next to the housing correspondent who was going to have lunch with somebody who was the head of one of the great mortgage companies. And he said to me, I'm not going to what I'm going to talk to him about. I said, I'll tell you what you're going to... Because one of the nastiest and most patronising of companies that I applied for, I think, was his, you see. So, naturally enough, he came back from lunch and said, oh, well, that's great. Lord, whatever his name was, has rung up the head of his mortgage department and said, give this clever young thing...
you got special treatment.
I got it, and I thought, how dare you? I mean, I got special treatment. I didn't turn it down, of course, just because it was so patronising. But then after that, I began to get very, very miffed.
The notion you could only buy a house as a woman, well, your husband had to do it for you. Your husband had to sign the document.
And if you were not married, and indeed, I seem to remember which magazine in 1980-something or other, did a thing about single women being able to get mortgages. And there were a couple of mortgage companies which would say, yes, they can, so long as they're over 45 and likely to sort of remain unmarried.
Wow. Let's park that thought. I could say plenty to that. I'm 44. Paris, are you a feminist?
I am a feminist, and it's interesting because when I was at university, I was Ms, and people used to think that meant that, I should be divorced. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'm at university in Brighton, and people don't really know about feminism. And I actually think in the past couple of years, something extraordinary has happened, and I think it's the internet. And I think so many young women now are ready to kind of say, hello, I'm a feminist again.
Anna, you're nodding.
I wouldn't call myself a feminist anymore. I did for many years. My earliest memories from 5 or 6 years old are of wanting, I can remember hearing Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive, and just being very sort of stoked up by it. But I would call myself a post-structuralist now, which basically I don't expect people to know or care what that means if they don't study gender studies. But what that actually means in short term is that I believe that gender is completely arbitrary, that it's actually a complete performance that we do, and that takes the emphasis off women. And I think one of the issues that we have with feminism at the moment is that we need to actually move on and start looking at men and understanding how men are gendered as well, how they're not. Because I kind of think that feminism encourages you to think that men have all the luck and stuff like this. But actually, because I'm doing a PhD in masculinities, I've studied men and I see they're just as fearful and just as anxious as we are, but they have to perform to this, this strong masculine thing that often leaves them feeling very isolated. So I think we need to bring in, because how can we understand what we consider to be offensive male behaviour and know that it isn't maybe defensive against women's power? We know nothing about how men perceive women's power, which is what I'm studying at the moment.
Paris, I just wonder whether you'd like to pick up on some of those thoughts, the notion of it as a construct.
To be honest, I don't think it's, because there's the whole nature-nurture debate, I don't think it's that black and white. I actually think it's a little bit of both. I think some of it's biological, some of it is social. I mean, I certainly know, I was born male and I transitioned to female, and I'm not saying that this is the case for everybody in my situation, but I know that I'm a lot calmer now that I've got estrogen flowing through my body. So it's not to say that, your biology and your anatomy is destiny and, women are this way and men are that way, but I think there's, a complex marriage between the two.